Welcome to The Block. He's Coach Carl Reed. He's Blake Brockermeyer, and I am Emily Proud. Guys, there is nothing more volatile than college football. So, sticking with that theme, let's do some stock up, stock down. And starting things off on a positive note, man, things are going well in the Evergreen State. Both Washington and Washington State are 3-0. Also, both programs have new coaches at the helm this season. So, Carl, how surprising is what you've seen from these teams to start the season?
Well, it's definitely surprising that they got it turned around this quickly. Nobody would have predicted this. When you talk about what's going on at Washington and Washington State, you're finding two football teams who are excelling at the identity of their head coach. Last year, the Washington Huskies were one of the worst offensive teams in the country. They bring in Kellen DeBoer, who has been an elite offensive coach his entire career, going all the way down to the NAIA and FCS levels. He has them looking like a well-oiled machine after being atrocious a year ago offensively. Then when you look at Washington State and you see Coach Jake Dickert, a guy who comes from that Tampa 2 defensive background, spent a lot of time with Coach Craig Bowl, who's at the University of Wyoming and was at North Dakota State, coming from that family of coaches defensively. He has turned the Washington State Cougars around on the defensive side of the ball. They had a great game plan against the University of Wisconsin and got a huge win. So what you see are two programs who got the right guy for their job, and they have injected their identity into those football teams, and they're both sitting at 3-0. Nobody would have guessed it before the season started.
Yeah, Carl, Washington on Saturday might have been one of the most impressive performances of the weekend, in my opinion. I was blown away watching their offense. Michael Penix was on fire. They've got a great system for him. Their offense was 115th in the country last year, and they were just painfully bad. And they got it going quickly. They lost a lot of guys to the transfer portal. They did bring some guys in that are helping as well, but very impressive for them. Playing at Husky Stadium has always been a huge home field advantage, and their schedule sets up very nicely for them this year. I look for Washington to be in the thick of the Pac-12 race at the end of the season. And then on the other note, watching Washington State versus Wisconsin 2 weeks ago, very opportunistic defense, great game plan. Offensively, they didn't take care of the ball. They didn't play a perfect game, but they still found a way to win on the road in a tough environment at Wisconsin. So both of those programs have been very impressive, and I always enjoy watching the Apple Cup at the end of the year. This year it should be a great game again.
Certainly, and usually you have to wait a few games into your tenure to get that signature win. Both of these new head coaches have that signature win just 3 games in, but it's not just the new head coaches. There's some new quarterbacks, too, for both of these teams. So, Carl, let's start with you. Michael Penix Jr., 10-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. How much has he elevated the Huskies?
Well, he's taken them to a completely different level by mastering what they're doing offensively and injecting leadership in them. If you have elite quarterback play, you're giving your team an outstanding chance to win. A lot of coaches look for guys that are game managers, guys that don't lose the game for them. But the great coaches really want a guy who can win them the game. He doesn't turn the ball over. He throws touchdown passes. He completes passes. And the big key is he takes care of the football. Very low turnover rate. He is the reason why they are going so well offensively.
It's a great offense for quarterbacks to play. And if I'm a high school quarterback, Washington is going to be near the top of my list, especially if I'm out on the West Coast, because high percentage throws, they'll move the pocket, they'll throw the nakeds and the underneath routes, and then they'll take their shots to stretch the field. So it's a great system, and Michael Penix has looked like he did 2 years ago at Indiana, and has got everything rolling for the Huskies right now.
And the familiarity between him and Coach DeBoer from the time at Indiana has to help also build a system.
Yeah, it's working out well for them so far. Meanwhile, Cameron Ward also elevating what the Cougs want to do on offense. He had a lot of options when he entered the transfer portal, but he chose Washington State. Blake, how have you seen him help his new team?
I think he's done a great job. He hasn't played perfectly in the games that I've watched, but he's done just enough. He can throw the ball very accurately. I think just playing at a little higher level of competition is probably going to be a little bit of an adjustment for him to really get dialed in. But he's been a big upgrade for them. And Washington State always does a nice job of throwing the football around. And he's just the next guy there that's going to be a great signal caller at Wazoo.
He's given them just enough offensively for them to win games and use their defense to really help control the game. Like Blake said, he hasn't played perfect yet, but he's getting really comfortable there, and he's going to make them an exciting team to watch down the stretch.
Well, it's been all fun and games so far, but coming up, Washington State hosts 15th ranked Oregon, while Washington hosts Stanford this weekend. So real quick, Carl, we'll start with you. Who's 4-0 after this weekend?
Well, right now, I really like Washington's chances against Stanford. I think they're going to have a good defensive game plan, and I think they're going to cause Stanford a lot of issues. I'm going to go with the Washington Huskies being 4-0.
Blake, what do you think?
I agree. I think for Washington State to win this weekend against Oregon is going to be a tough task for them. I like Washington's chances against Stanford. I think they're a better team. And as long as they don't, have a letdown after last week, obviously they were juiced up and Husky Stadium was rocking. So they got to keep that same energy this week, or just like anybody in the country, anyone can beat you. And Stanford has just enough talent that they could definitely beat them if they're not playing their A game.
Fun time if you're rooting for a team in the Evergreen State. Well, guys, as for a stock down, we got to do it. The time is now for Spencer Rattler to produce. He had the change of scenery, now at South Carolina, but through 3 games, he has just 2 touchdowns to 5 interceptions and is 0-2 in conference play. There's, of course, no easy game in the SEC, but to be fair, he faced a tough road environment at a top 10 Arkansas and ran into the freight train that is the #1 team in the nation, Georgia. Are we overreacting to Rattler's rough start, Blake?
I think I think we are not overreacting. I think they have played 2 really good teams. Arkansas, ironically, is last in the country in pass defense. So that, I think, is something that would be a little bit concerning, since that was his best game so far, passing the ball. But I think in reality, I think the expectations for Spencer Rattler have been overblown. He's I think a pretty average quarterback. His numbers say right now that he's below average. He's 13th in the SEC with a 32.6 QBR. Like you said, he's got 2 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions, and they still have 5 really good teams that they're going to play defensively. So I don't expect Rattler's stats to be too crazy here anytime soon. They got a lot of tough games ahead of them, and South Carolina's got to get right these next 2 weeks and get wins and look better offensively and defensively.
Blake, the expectations are high because he talks so much. Every time you turn on the TV, every time you look on anything, it's Spencer Rattler saying something. He said anywhere was better than being at OU. He said he wasn't treated right by Lincoln Riley. Man, it's time for you to ball. We're making excuses about the schedule. Yeah, you played Georgia. Let's throw that one out. Missouri State almost knocked Arkansas this past Saturday, and they have one of the worst passing defenses so far in the country. It's time to stop making excuses for Spencer Rattler and play football. You have 2 touchdowns. You have 5 picks. You blame everything on Lincoln Riley, but him and Caleb Williams are out in LA balling. It's time for you to stop talking, and it's time for you to step up and play real football. If you're the big-time quarterback, everybody's asking, can he play his way back into the first round? Can he be a high draft pick? You got to go out there and play quarterback at a high level, complete passes, master the offense that they're putting in. Shane Beamer is protecting you in every way possible. He's endorsed you at a high level. It's time for you to play football. You said the environment at Oklahoma is toxic. One thing that I know about life, you take you with you every single place you go. Everybody's having success. Oklahoma's winning. USC is winning with Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams. It's time for you to put up a shut up, and let's see if you're the real deal or if you're fool's gold.
Yeah, I think he needs help too. I mean, Spencer Rattler can't do it all by himself. He has not lived up to the offseason hype this year or last year. But his offensive line at South Carolina is not doing very well. They're one of the worst in the country in sacks given up. He needs some of his playmakers at wide receivers to step up and make plays for them. Last year's leading receiver Josh Vann is hardly done anything this year at South Carolina. So they have some good players, especially at wide receiver and tight end, and they got to get it going here quickly because the schedule is going to continue to get hard here, and for them to be bowl eligible, they're going to have to pull off an upset somewhere along the way.
You need a quarterback that everybody can rally around and believe in. It's time for him to show some leadership. We don't want to hear any more from his quarterback trainer. We don't want to hear any more excuses. We want to see you deliver on Saturdays this fall.
Yeah, Blake, you said that expectations were maybe a little overblown for Spencer Rattler. That's your opinion of what he would look like at South Carolina. But do you think that the hype was warranted given what Carl just said about all the talk and everything that he said after leaving Oklahoma?
Yeah, for some reason, Spencer Rattler looked really, pretty good his freshman year and just has not looked the same since. So I don't know. Oklahoma has more talent around him than South Carolina does. And I think that they have a better play caller in Lincoln Riley than South Carolina does and Marcus Satterfield. But at some point, like Carl said, he's got to deliver. I think we have to realize that maybe he's not the guy that we thought he was going to be at this point. And so I just don't think that we can count on Spencer Rattler to be that guy who's going to be a first or second round pick. He's not. That's not who he is.
We can all agree, though, that Rattler is a step up from the revolving door at quarterback that they trotted out last year, especially with a grad assistant actually getting in a game at some point. But why is this team worse with Rattler and a lot of transfers? You talked about the talent they have on this team, than with him. Does this fall on Shane Beamer, Blake?
Well, I think the schedule has something to do with it. I mean, Arkansas and Georgia are two really good teams, but it's going to continue. I mean, they still have some really tough games coming up. And so offensively, they're 100th in the country in total offense. I think what you really have to look at is their defense. And they had a lot of injuries last week against Georgia. I think they had 5 starters out for the game, but a couple of those guys are done for the year, but they're 113th in the country in total defense. They've only gotten 2 sacks and they've only got 1 interception so far defensively. So I think it falls on the offense, but it falls on the defense as well, because they are getting run through by everybody that they're playing against. And so they got to get right these next 2 weeks. Hopefully they can stay healthy. But like I said a minute ago, they're going to be the teams that they're favored to win, that they'll be favored to win, and they have to win those games, which are 4 games. And then they're going to have to upset someone along the way that they will not be favored in. So I think the key game looking down the stretch for them is going to be a do or die game, to whether they make a bowl game or not, is going to be after the bye week. They play A&M at home, and that's a game they will not be favored in, but that's a game that they're going to need to probably win to make a bowl game, in my opinion.
Emily, one of the downsides of the transfer portal that we don't talk about, yes, on the one hand, you can change your team's talent in a hurry and fill some holes. On the other hand, it takes longer to build the chemistry that you need to be good in football, whether it's the offensive line cohesion, new quarterback, new system. Football is still the ultimate team game. And when you don't have everybody there developing over a long period of time, it can take longer to gel. And that's the other side of the transfer portal.
So how much extra pressure does it add to the head coach, though, to get them ready to go? Because we can talk about this. It's a very rational way of thinking, but fans are going to look at Jimmy's and Joe's. And right now it looks like South Carolina should be performing a lot better than they are.
Yeah, at some point that's gonna fall on Shane Beamer. I think the fans last week left the game early. Understandably, it was not a good product on the field. But I think at some point you're going to have to realize that South Carolina is never consistently going to be better than the blue bloods in the SEC. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, occasionally they're going to have a year or two where they might overachieve, but you have to take it for what they are. They're a 6, 7 every couple of years, maybe win 8 or 9 game type team. And so it's a tough league. They got a tough draw with some really good teams coming up. But I think that the expectations, at least my expectations for them going forward for the next couple of years at least, are, make a bowl game. I mean, that to me, 6 or 7 wins is probably the expectation in my mind.
Any man that chooses to make his living coaching football in the SEC knows the amount of pressure that he's under, and he doesn't need to be told that. In the SEC, you always one game away from being out of the conference race. You're 2 games away from being out of the top 25, and you're 3 games away from losing your job. That's the way that it works in that league. It's very, very volatile. Shane Beamer knows the amount of pressure that he's under, as does every other single coach coaching in that division. But the money is outstanding, and the competition is the very top. And so you want those challenges, but all the head coaches in the SEC know what time it is when they sign that contract.
And Shane Beamer is going to have some tough decisions to make after the season this year. I mean, their offense, like I said, is ranked 100th in the country right now. Their defense is 113th. So at some point, you're going to have to make some tough decisions on your coaching staff. And so it's a big boy job. That's it. That's going to be his role and decision to what can make South Carolina better in the offseason. And then they're going to have to figure out their quarterback situation again after the season.
Blake, is it really a tough decision to make if your offense is number 100 in the country?
I mean, to me, it's not. But coaches are loyal. The coaches have their guys. They're loyal. Some coaches would rather get fired than fire their buddies that they're coaching with. And so I don't think that Shane Beamer is not going to get fired after the season. But he doesn't have any head coaching experience before this, and he's never been a coordinator, offensive or offensive coordinator before. So there'll be a lot of questions on South Carolina going forward.
Yeah, always difficult competing in the SEC, but South Carolina has a special circumstance as well. They've got Clemson in their own backyard that they've got to play every single year. Let's do some division debate. We are a fourth of the way into the season, which is nuts to think about, starting to get into the real meat of the schedule and some more conference play. So we're going to highlight the Big Ten East. Let's take a look at the current standings right now. The Hoosiers and Nittany Lions are the only teams who have played a Big Ten game, so that's why you see them at the top of the standings. I'm not sure if that's how it's going to be at the end of the year, but look at this. 6 teams are undefeated. Michigan State, the only one with a loss, but still a winning record. But here is how our friends Carl and Blake power rank these teams. Carl has got Penn State as the second best team behind Ohio State, while Blake has Michigan in that spot. Blake a little higher on Maryland here, but let's start here. Carl, if Penn State and Michigan played Saturday, are you saying that you're taking the Nittany Lions?
Yeah, I would take the Nittany Lions
okay.
right now. I think they're great at the running back position, as we talked about here recently after the game. And I think that Manny Diaz is a man on a mission right now defensively to regain his form and show that he's one of the top coaches in the country. What he's doing defensively right now, the way he's bringing pressures, the way he's moving his front, the way he's dealing with coverage on the back end, I think that they're going to cause Michigan a lot of problems, and every other team that they play for that matter. But I think Manny Diaz and Nick Singleton might be the 2 biggest of additions to any football team this past offseason.
Blake, I'm not going to lie. This is why you guys are the experts. I look at Michigan and I go, I have no idea what to do with them based on who they've played. The only thing I learned about them through the first 3 games is that J.J. McCarthy is going to be the starter at quarterback. What have you learned about Michigan that is the reason that you propelled them to number 2 in the Big Ten East?
Well, I think Michigan has looked dominant, like you said. They haven't played anyone, which is concerning to me. I did think about putting Penn State at number two, just because they had an impressive win last week. But you got to remember they beat Auburn, who's probably going to finish last in the SEC West. So take that with a grain of salt. But Michigan's looked good. I think we won't know much about them until they play Penn State in the middle of October. That's going to be a great game, but they're at home for that game, and I expect that to be a huge test for them. But I do like what I see. Their offensive line looks really good. They've got a couple of capable running backs that are dominant. J.J. McCarthy gives them the upside at quarterback to go deep into the playoffs. And so we're not going to know about them for a little bit longer, but you can't, you can't downgrade them because of who they played, but there are some question marks that would have to be answered when they play Penn State in middle of October.
Michigan is set to play Maryland this weekend, which made us think that, the consensus is that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State are all the contenders in that division. But I'll ask you this, who on this list is more likely to cause a little bit of chaos? Not win the East necessarily, but be competitive with the elite. Carl, let's start with you.
I really like what Mike Locksley's doing at Maryland. I think he's doing a phenomenal job. He has a quarterback now that he believes in. He's dominant in recruiting in that area, and his team is starting to take on his identity. I look for Maryland to be a team that's going to go to a bowl game, and they can put a couple scares into some of these better teams down the stretch. I would not sleep on Maryland right now if I was any of these programs in the Big Ten.
Maryland's got some talent. I like Maryland as well. I actually think that after Michigan State, they're probably the next best team, but their schedule does not set up great for them. And so that's what concerns me most about Maryland is they've got some really tough games on the road that I think are gonna be tough wins for them.
So who do you think is most likely to cause chaos, Blake?
I like Indiana, and Indiana is a team that hosts Michigan in a few weeks at home, and then they catch Penn State after a bye week in early November. So I think they have a little bit more of a home field advantage than a Maryland does, and I feel like that Connor Bazelak is a capable quarterback that's done it at a high level in the SEC. So I could see Indiana causing a scare in the Big Ten this season, and their home schedule, I think, is the reason for it.
Blake, I agree with you. I like Indiana a lot. Tom Allen is doing a great job. Connor Bazelak, transferred from the University of Missouri, has been playing phenomenal for them at quarterback so far. Emily and Blake, I think when you look at the Big Ten East, and when we talk about Maryland, Rutgers, Indiana, I think that those teams did an excellent job at finding the head coach that fit their school. Tom Allen is a longtime high school coach in the state of Indiana, a Hall of Fame high school coach. Now he's coaching the Indiana Hoosiers. Greg Schiano is a Rutgers guy, his second tour of duty there. Nobody knows New Jersey and that recruiting area the same way as he does. Mike Locksley has dominated the DMV in recruiting. He's back in Maryland. He's back in his area. When you look throughout these teams, the success they're having is because they all have the right fit at head coach. Obviously, they'll start having to bump heads in conference, so a couple of people are going to start taking losses. But each athletic director here should be commended on finding the right kind of guy to run this program that has roots in recruiting the areas that they need to be successful in.
I know our producer Kenny is probably doing cartwheels in the back right now. He's a big Maryland fan. Definitely wanted to give them some love today. But Blake, I want to clarify a little bit about what you said. Is it more the schedule for you and the way that it lays out? If we were to put Maryland and Indiana on a field together, how do you think that would play out?
Well, we're going to find out in a few weeks, but I do think. I mean, if we're talking a team that has a chance to upset someone, I think Indiana's got a better chance of it just because they're playing at home, and so you catch a team at home, you've got a little home field advantage. Indiana seems to have a good crowd at the games that I watched them play Illinois a few weeks ago, and They were bringing it in the stand. So I think that's really the main reason. I think on paper, Maryland has a little bit more talent, but their schedule doesn't set up as well, and I'm not sure they have the home field advantage that maybe Indiana does.
You don't play games on paper. That's what makes college football so fun. Guys, thank you so much for the conversation, and thank you for joining us here on The Block. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. We'll see you back here, same time tomorrow.